Men have been steadily dropping out of the workforce, especially men aged 25 to 54, who are often considered to be in their prime working years. As of August 2024, 13.7% of prime-age men were not working, compared to just 7.2% in 1954.
Men are rapidly dropping out of the workforce, and guess who's panicking? Society. Watch another video to fully understand the implications of so many men dropping out of the workforce and why both society and women are starting to panic. Remember that there are timestamps in the description now, so you can go and bounce around in the video as you please. And now let's just go ahead and jump right into the very first video.
Joining us now is author Nicholas Eberstadt. He's the author of a fantastic book, Men Without Work. Let's go ahead and put it up there on the screen, which actually has a new introduction, which is part of the reason that we all wanted to talk. Men Without Work, which demonstrates a crisis of male wages, of unemployment, talks about some of the reasons. So just for context, Nick, we actually recently had Richard Reeves on to discuss his book of Boys and Men, and we got a tremendous response from our audience, and it's something we want to tug on a little bit more. I was familiar with your work now for quite some time, so just describe maybe the original thesis of the book and then why it becomes even more relevant in the aftershock of the COVID lockdowns and the economy that we're all living in 2022.
Sure. Well, it's a problem that's been hiding in plain sight for almost 2 generations. We've been seeing this previously invisible crisis of the collapse of work for men, mainly driven by an exit from the workforce of prime-age men, of 25 to 54-year-olds, let's say. It's been almost a straight line up from 65 to the present. I put out the first edition of this book in 2016, and the unnerving, eerie thing is the line I calculated for the exit from the workforce, which is almost straight, has just continued right on from 2016 to the present. So we've got more than 7 million prime-age guys neither working nor looking for work. For every guy who's unemployed, there are over 4 who are neither working nor looking for work today. And that is why male work rates are now kind of at about 1937 levels. We have a depression scale problem of work for men on our hands right now. And that's obviously not the only thing going wrong in our workforce right now.
So do we know what those men are doing instead of working in regular jobs? And also, I was curious, in the statistics, do things like, driving for Uber or these sort of like gig economy type of work, is that included in the statistics of men who are working?
That's supposed to be included, Crystal. I mean, in principle, in practice, some of it may be missed. In practice, some moonlighting may be missed, but the scale of the problem, I think, is basically pretty for real. I think the scale of the problem isn't artificial.
And so do we have a sense of like what they're doing with their days instead of work?
So about a tenth, maybe a little more than a tenth of these guys who are not in the workforce are really full-time students. The way they behave, the way they act is more or less like people who are employed, not surprisingly, because they're expecting to get back into the workforce. For the overwhelming majority, though, the people who are neither employed nor in education and training, you've got a really dispiriting picture that is being painted by them, by their self-reported answers to surveys about how they spend their time. They basically say that they don't do civil society, that they don't do worship or charity or volunteering. They say that they do remarkably little help around the house, either with people at home or with housework. What they report doing most is watching. We can't tell from the surveys what they're watching. We can't tell what type of devices or what the content is. But like 2,000 hours a year, as if it were a full-time job. And before the pandemic, they also reported, almost half of these men reported, that they were taking pain medication every day, some type of pain medication. So we've got a kind of a tableau suggesting that people are kind of prepping for deaths of despair in too many cases.
And so what are the downstream social effects of this? Like, why should people care, in essence? What socialized costs are all of us incurring as a result of this crisis?
I've thought about that a lot, Cigar, and as far as I can tell, there's absolutely nothing good that comes out of this. It leads to this huge gap in our workforce, means slower economic growth. It also means bigger income and wealth gaps in our society. It probably means more dependence upon social programs and social welfare over the long term, more pressure on fragile families, less social mobility, less involvement in society, and trust in institutions.
So they're beginning to panic. They're beginning to panic because their slaves have left the plantation. They said, we've had enough. We've taken our ball and gone home. I've said this plenty of times that the average man can live happily in a shoebox at the side of the road. The average woman cannot. The reason why society is beginning to panic is because men pay 80% of all taxes, while women make 80% of all consumer purchases. And as a result of that, women are the ones who are depending the most on society, not men. Okay? Men do not need society. Society needs men. But if you look at how men are treated by society and by women in society, they don't have a dog in the fight. They're treated like shit. So men are done. They're staying home, they're playing video games, and they're only working enough to survive and thrive and no more. These men do not need society's blessing. These men do not need society at all. They can survive and thrive without society. It's the truth. The average man will leave a surplus on the economy over the course of his life. That basically means that he will put more money into the economy over the course of his life than he will take out. The average woman will take more money out of the economy than she will put into the economy over the course of her life. The only reason why we're able to have social safety nets and all of the programs, everything that is paid for in society, is because of men. And like I said earlier, men pay 80% of all the taxes, and women make 80% of all consumer purchases. So it's very unbalanced right there. As men begin walking away from relationships, dating, society, and they say that, yeah, we're done with this, this leaves society in a very harsh place, because there's no way for them to really communicate with men other than demanding that men get back to work or forcing men back to work. They could try bachelor taxes, but we know how those turn out. Everything that they do is basically the stick with men. You know, the state, the purpose of women in society, their job is to operate as agents of the state and to reallocate wealth and resources from men back to the state. And when they do this, they are then rewarded by the state. And they do this through the divorce court, they do this through family court, they do this through the criminal court, they do it through a civil court. It doesn't really matter. As long as they do this, the state will reward them. But as men are walking away, not establishing families, not having relationships, not dating, and not working, all of that money is no longer flowing to the state. Without men in the workforce working their butts off so that they can go out there and achieve the American dream and take a woman on a date and get married and buy a house and all of this other shit, without men striving for these things, everything starts to collapse. Men are the backbone of the American economy. Men are the backbone of society. And a man without love for country or family will fight for neither. Hence, men don't have a single fucking dog in the entirety of this fight. And a country without its men is not a country. A country without its men is a wasteland. Women are very much responsible, but of course, they will never take any accountability for what they've done. They traded in men. They traded in men for instant gratification in the present. They tried this crap in the black community with things like public assistance, and it worked so well that they expanded the program. Okay? Society has been divided up. And women, you have to understand something about women. Women are not victims of feminism. Feminism is not this big evil thing like some people try to characterize it as. Feminism is just a concept of equality between men and women. All right. But women took feminism and they exploited it. Feminism did not exploit women. Women fully exploited feminism for their own means. They used the guise of equality to get expanded privileges while men were given special punishments. So women have special privileges, men have special punishments. And they continue to claim to be victims, so they are powerful victims, while men are always pathetic villains. This is how women operate. And that's why men are done with society. It's not just simply the wages. It has more. If a man really wants a relationship, he will fight tooth and nail. He will work 100 hours. 100 is a little is exaggerating. He'll work 70 hours a week. He'll work more than 70 hours a week. Okay, to get to so that he can afford these things, so he can afford to take care of a woman. But when he looks at society today, the way that women are behaving, the fact that they're saying that men who make less than 100K, less than six figures, are broke boys, calling guys who are 6'4" short kings, saying that truck drivers, are not respectable men, even though these guys are pulling in over 100K, a lot of them, men are just done. They're just going to spend that money on themselves and walk away from dating relationships and people who do not value them.
There's just, you do the 360, there is nothing good that comes out of this.
And what do you see as the spark that set this process in motion? Because I believe you said it's basically a straight line since I think you said 1965. So what starts to happen that changes the dynamic that leads to this sort of, not just dropping out of the workforce, but becoming a sort of observer of society rather than a participant in altogether?
It's a really profound question, Crystal. And since this has been going on for over half a century, it's an established historical fact, a big fact. And like other big established historical facts, it's probably got a lot of influences intertwined there. Sure. I can point to a couple of things. One has been the erosion of the previous family order in the United States, because the men who are never married or don't have kids at home are way less likely to be involved in the workforce too. Another is the expansion of social welfare benefits. Our system is very stingy. I've been told by anybody I talk to in Europe or other, affluent societies in the world. But there can still be perverse disincentives, especially in our disability archipelago of programs to infantilize people who shouldn't be affected that way. We've also seen the explosion of crime and the explosion of punishment. This is a really big one. Our government does not collect any decent data on our invisible ex-con population, but we have reason to think that there are now 25 million American adults who have a felony in their background. Wow. And you know that mass incarceration is the problem we talk about. It's like 2 million people. But that's less than a tenth of this big problem I'm mentioning. So about 1 in 7 adult guys, by my calculation, has a felony in his background. And that has to be a big part of what we're seeing here.
Are we seeing a similar trend in other developed nations, or is the U.S. alone in this?
In every rich country, you see some decline in prime male labor force involvement. There is no other country in the rich democratic world that has had such a steady plunge as ours. Of the two big rich countries in the world, the ones that are closest to being twins are Canada and the U.S., and our decline is way worse than Canada's.
And so in terms of solutions, what do you propose? Is it just socializing the conversation, getting people to debate it, getting people to acknowledge the facts? Because I don't see them really represented in our culture at all.
No, this is an invisible crisis still. It baffles me why people aren't talking about this. Maybe because the guys are too often dying deaths of despair and they're not burning cars or seeming to be a menace to society. In terms of big solutions, I forgot my magic wand today, so I can't fix the family and do other sorts of fundamental changes in our society. But government can still do things. We've got this gigantic vocational skill gap because our broken education system isn't preparing everybody the way they should to have a marketable skill when they graduate from K through 12 or from college. We need, I think, to have a work first principle in our social welfare programs. That might turn out to be more expensive, but even if it were more expensive, I think the consequences would be better for our society. And we should be shining a spotlight on our invisible ex-con population. I mean, we can't have evidence-based policies for getting these millions and millions of Americans back into employment and families and societies if we don't have the evidence.
One thing that I think is important, distinction that you have been making, which I think really matters, is, to me, like, work is not everything. There are a lot of ways to find meaning in life that's outside of like a 9-to-5 job. But what you're pointing to is a larger crisis of just sort of total disconnection. And as you're saying, I can't imagine that ends in any good place, certainly for these individual men, for the people who are around them, who may depend on them for various things, or for society as a whole. Do we have any sort of historical models of what this looks like?
Well, yeah, I mean, back in the 1800s, there was a sociologist called Emil Durkheim who talked about anomie and atomization. He did a lot of work on suicide and things like that. I mean, you can go, I mean, if you want to kind of like play fancy pants, you can go all the way back to Aristotle and talk about how he noticed that human beings were social creatures, that they needed to be part of society to thrive.
The truth that society does not want to admit is quite a simple one. Men do not need to be a part of society to thrive. Society needs men to be a part of society so that society in and of itself can thrive. Men do not need women. Women need men. Men built everything and men maintain everything. Men are the ones who create wealth. Okay? Men are the ones who are willing to suffer. Women cannot suffer. This is a superpower that men have. Well, not only are we able to suffer, but we're able to overcome said suffering and even thrive in the face of suffering. These are things that women cannot do so easily. The moment women have to deal with just a little bit of pain, just a little bit of suffering, they break down. They want to leave. It's the honest to goodness truth. Women are not built for it, okay? This is a man thing. It is 100% a man thing. And this is the reason why so many women are stressing out right now, crying on the internet about inflation, crying that they can barely afford food, that they can't even afford food in some cases. In many cases, if a woman cannot find a man to take her out on a date that evening, she does not eat. She's not going to eat. She's basically screwed. That's the reality of it. And women are the ones who put themselves in this position. They said that they did not want men. They did not need men. But the sick truth, the sad truth, is that they need men now more than ever. Women have every single thing they could ever imagine. And yet, think about it. Their well-being is lower than women who were born 100 years ago. The reason why is because women were not designed to live outside of the family unit. I have these bots that'll come to the channel and try to argue with me and say that they know women who are thriving without men. They know older women who are thriving without men, so it's not true. What does a man have to get out of saying that it's not true? These are simps. And a lot of simps refuse to accept reality. It kind of irritates me because they come here and they'll gobble up my videos and they'll watch one video after another video after another video, and then they'll talk shit in the comments. Because the thing is that these men, they can't change. This is how they survive. But why are they here? Why are they here? Why are they listening to these videos? Because they have nowhere else to go. They have nowhere else to go because everywhere they go in society is hostile towards them. And why is society hostile towards them? Because that's the society that they helped to create. The way that women are and what women have done in society is more so a symptom of the simps and what they pushed for happening and what they allowed to happen. The Sims are completely to blame for all of this. These are evil, evil critters. The most despicable, disgusting critters you could ever imagine. These people, these individuals. The simp. You can barely characterize the simp as a human, because it absolutely is not. It's a despicable creature, an evil, awful creature, terrible creature, wicked creature, disgusting creature. That is the simp. I'm telling you guys, as men, we don't hold simps accountable enough. We do not speak out on them enough and say that this thing is disgusting. Because the simp has destroyed society. The simp continues to destroy the lives of men. The simp is a horrible creature. And I use the word creature very, very loosely. But still directing it at the evil simp. I don't know, guys. We are heading into such a dystopic reality that it's insane. You know, everything is going to hell in a handbasket. And it's going to, guys, basically, I've said this already, society won't collapse. Groups of people in society will collapse. And when that happens, it's going to be motherfucking awful. It's going to be awful. It's going to be hell on earth. Everything is going to be for sale. People are going to be for sale. It's going to be a nightmare out there. And who are to blame? The Sims. The fucking Sims. These people are responsible for the hell on earth that we are now facing. Because these bastards lacked self-control. Because these bastards decided to betray men. Because this is how they chose to survive. Evil motherfuckers. Evil motherfuckers.
And that part of our human nature, I don't think, has changed in 2,500 years. So you've got people who are dropped out of work, dropped out of family, dropped out of community, dropped out of faith. Why do we think this experiment could end well, ever?
Yeah.
I think that's really well said.
Last question for you. You talked about some of the sort of like the sticks in particular of, having a work requirement for welfare programs. I'm a little bit skeptical of that, especially because of the evidence around universal basic income that shows there isn't really a drop off in like interest or working when you receive those payments. But we'll put that debate aside. Sure. What about just making work more appealing? I mean, during the time period you're talking about, you've had union rates massively declining. Over some significant portion of those decades, you've actually had male wages going down. So, it's not crazy for guys to look at that and say, like, this is just not worth it. Like, I can work my ass off and still not be able to buy a house, have a family, like, live that American dream. So why should I bother?
Well, I think we had a little bit of a kind of a natural experiment during the pandemic. In 2020 and 2021, immigration to the United States was severely disrupted. There was all of this argument about our immigrants stealing American jobs. Well, the native U.S.-born work rate for guys did not go up, or for anybody else, did not go up during that period. It's still way lower than it was before the pandemic. We had a more rapid increase in wages, especially for the lower occupational skill levels in 2021 than we'd had in a long time, and it didn't seem to have a big effect of bringing people back. I mean, there's a very good argument for having higher wages because we want to have a prosperous society and we want to have escalators that work for people. The troubling thing is that there's reason to think that once people drop out of the labor force, especially guys from this prime age group, that they tend to remain long-termers. That isn't so much, that has not been true with women so much. I mean, we have the existence proof of, moms who go out of the workforce and go back in, but they have a very different set of skills. They don't get any sick days or vacation days from their kids, right? They are they're the reliable, dependable people that employers want. The sorts of habits that people develop if they're guys on the couch with pain medication is not what employers are looking for.
Wow. Really interesting subject. I think we're just gonna have to keep diving into it. And I appreciate your work, just putting the data out there. Data in itself is a way for us to spark the conversation. So thanks very much, sir. Thank you for joining
Great
us.
talking to you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Absolutely.
They suddenly want to spark a conversation on why are the men leaving? Why don't the men want to be here anymore? I don't understand. What are we going to do? The men don't want to be here anymore because of what you've done to the men. The men don't want to be here anymore because of how hostile society is towards the men. The men don't want to be here anymore because society is completely broken. It is a volatile, hostile institution built to extract wealth and resources from men and reward women and sims for helping the society to do this. All right? That's how society operates. It operates off the backs of men. Slavery never ended, it simply expanded. That's the honest to goodness truth. We are living in one of the absolute worst timelines right now. Okay? We are. We are. I know we are. You know we are. It's such a miserable thing, a miserable state of affairs, the way that we now live. Just awful.
The long-term decline in labor force participation by so-called prime age men is a tremendous worry for our society, for our economy, and probably also for our political system.
There's a surplus of prime age workers who could be working and aren't, and that's this puzzling problem.
The unemployment rate for prime age working men sat at 3.4% in August 2024. This number primarily includes those who are unemployed and looking for a job. But about 10.5% of men in their prime working years, or roughly 6.8 million men nationwide, are neither working nor looking for employment, compared to just 2.5% in 1954.
What's surprising is it's not a COVID phenomenon, it's not a recession phenomenon.
And for every prime age man who is unemployed and looking for a job, there are more than 3, and some years 4, who are neither working nor looking for work.
So what's driving men out of the workforce? And if left unchecked, what impact will it have on the US economy?
So this is all very interesting. Society told men that it doesn't like them, doesn't want them, and now it's going absolutely frightened. This is a recent story. This story just came out. The society is frightened and panicking because if men, the backbone of the economy, aren't working, what's going to happen? How long can this last? Men are not on strike. Men have walked away, okay? Men walking away. Men are choosing from their best alternatives, all right? And they're dealing with a toxic society, a society that hates them, women in society that do not like men. They do not like us. They resent us. They do not want us around. Guys, we are basically harassed just existing, and we were told that we're the ones doing the harassing, okay? And trust me, I guarantee you that when it all begins to backfire on women, they'll turn around and say that it's a type of violence and that it's patriarchal and that men not wanting to work alongside women and not wanting to pull their weight in society is like it's revenge for women's liberation and that these men are misogynist. This is what they're going to say. And it's amazing how they'll never put 2 and 2 together and realize that they're the ones pushing men out, and it's this type of rhetoric why men are leaving. But they don't care. You have to remember that women operate entirely based on emotion. They're extremely volatile especially when it comes to things that challenge them. So they're not going to apply facts or reasoning, especially when they're the reason why so many men are now walking away from Western society, walking away from relationships, from dating, and from the workforce. Because the average man can make more than enough money to survive if he does not have a wife or children. I mean, guys, I buy new games on Steam almost every single day. I'll get a notification. I'll get a notification from Steam, and it'll tell me, "Oh, hey, Angry, there's a game that you wanted that's on the Steam that's available for on sale right now. There's a big sale on it." And, I usually can get it for like a couple of bucks, $20 or so, 15, $5. And I just sit around buying Steam games. I don't get to play games as much as I want to, but knowing that I own them is still fun. And, I figure that eventually I'll get around to it.
Nearly half of prime-age men out of the workforce cited obsolete skills, lack of education and training, poor work record, or security issues as a reason preventing them from work.
Education is a very important predictor of a prime age man's odds of being out of the labor force.
The big impacts are on the non-college educated groups on their ability to enter and stay in the labor market.
Men who are not college educated leave the workforce at higher rates than men who are. At the same time, fewer younger men have been enrolling in college over the past decade.
If you look at the geography of where the most prime age men out of the labor force are in particular, they tend to be in places that have experienced manufacturing declines. They used to graduate with a high school education and have good, stable jobs. They weren't glamorous jobs. They were, automobile factories, sometimes mines, other manufacturing jobs, but they were respected, they were stable, and they could support a family. Since then, due to technology-driven growth, a little bit due to Chinese competition, you've had a lot of manufacturing firms and the places where they were located that were one-horse towns become ghost lands, right?
Wages could also be a contributing factor. Median annual wages for men with a high school diploma have fallen from just over $57,600 in 1973 to $45,000 in 2023, adjusted for inflation.
It's amazing, guys, how oblivious these people are to why men are walking away from society. Oh, things are peaches and cream for men. These men are just lazy, or these men are just having a hard time finding an income. These men, guys, after M2 and all of these other things, they act like they have no idea why men are walking away, why men are choosing to distance themselves from society, relationships, the workforce, and instead just focus on themselves and their own happiness. Oh, they have no idea. It's 100% gaslighting. This is the reason why I told you, they don't care about men. They could care less about us. They care only about our utility. Guys, you ever have camel meat before? I want to try camel meat so bad. I watched some videos on YouTube of them prepared camel meat. It looks so fucking delicious, guys. That shit looks so delicious. I fucking want to try camel meat at least once in my fucking life. Maybe if I go to Dubai, maybe because I'd like to go visit Dubai at some point. Like, guys, you have to travel. Women basically enjoy their lives. The world is my oyster, or the world is my, and I can do whatever I want, and guys, these women are so funny. They put up these videos, acting like they're like the world is like they're gonna live their best life. And then at the end of that adventure, well, the adventure never really ends for them, but at the end of the first part, where they're they're broke and, they want a family, so they can continue extracting wealth and resources from men, they're suddenly peeved because men don't want to have relationships. They go after the passport kings and they say the most ridiculous things about them. They go after the women that these passport kings are getting into a relationship with. And it's just never ending, guys. The more they speak, the more they open their mouths, the worse it absolutely gets. Women do not know how to even be kind to a man. All right? They just know how to put men down, how to humiliate men. That's really just it. It's really it. Because you have to understand, like I said again, I'll say it again and again. We live in a society that hates us. We live in a society that does not like us. We live in a society that only strives to humiliate us. That's it. There's nothing else there. There's nothing else there. This is a society that does not like us. It's so funny, guys, though, because I see these videos. I see these videos from showing relationships and dates, and it's like, bro, this is not really happening. Most men are avoiding relationships. Most men are avoiding dates. Guys, look at this. The men are leaving, and they're coming after us because we were told that we were unwanted and we were unneeded. Like, that's what women say. These men were sent on their way. Okay, so if we were sent on our way, why the fuck are you bugging us for? Why are you coming at us for leaving? You didn't want us, so we're minding our business and going away. No, you guys are going over there for bad reasons. You should be able to get any baddie in America. We don't want you. We don't listen, the baddest of the baddest woman, we don't want you. We don't want your personality. We don't like your qualities. And oh, so you don't like our qualities? What you're looking for is you're looking for a woman that you can take advantage of. The hard truth is that women are coming up with every possible reason to blame, the fact that men are no longer attracted to women in Western society, and so they have to use the only skill sets they know how to use: shame, all right, sign language, shame, insults, guilt, gaslighting, nagging, because they need to be right. Those are the only tools that they have. Those are the only means of coming back at men, because they do not know how to catch a man with honey. It's far too late. Okay, the seed of disdain towards men. It's something that was planted inside of them. It's something that was in there. It's a seed that was in them at the time of birth, and it was given, it was given sun, it was given water, it was nurtured, and it's now rooted. It's rooted throughout all of their bodies. So it's not something that will ever go away. It is a part of them, and they can only pretend at best not to be that way. But the truth is, that's always who they will be, and that's always what truly what they are.
At the same time, wages for those with a bachelor's degree or more have increased by about $6,300 during the same period. This decline in earnings led to a 44% growth in the exit rate of men without a college degree from the workforce between 1980 and 2019.
I think, honestly, status plays more of a role than wages. As I said before, you had a manufacturing job, it was respected, you were part of a community, breadwinner for your family, you had organizations like unions or Rotary clubs that surrounded your job, and that's gone.
In general, men without children are also less likely to participate in the workforce compared to men with children, especially men without education or training after high school.
What we have seen is a huge rise in the proportion of prime-age men who've never been married, and a very, very significant decline in the proportion who are currently married and have kids at home. And those two trends track closely with the big changes that we've seen about male attachment in the labor force. Correlation isn't always causation, but looking at that correspondence is real important, I think.
Meanwhile, 57% of the roughly 10% of men not looking for work said their physical or mental health was the main reason for not being employed, with 55% citing a disability, serious illness, and/or receiving disability benefits.
The whole question about the health and the mental health of male workforce dropouts is an extremely important and I think concerning one. Distressing proportion of the men who are out of the workforce say they're using pain medications every day.
A 2017 research paper estimates that an increase in opioid prescription between 1999 to 2015 led to about 43% of the decline in men's labor force participation rate during that period.
So then you have to ask, what sort of pain are we talking about? Are we talking about physical pain? Are we talking about metaphysical pain? There's an enormous amount of depression, mental health challenges that men in this grouping face. Some of this is a chicken and egg question. Did you drop out because you were feeling sad? Or are you sad because you dropped out and you're living on the couch?
Unemployment is really terrible for people's well-being. Often people adapt to all kinds of negative shocks, losing a kid, being widowed, whatever, and eventually kind of come back. But long-term unemployment is one of the worst things in terms of that. So what you have is a kind of scarring effect, and it's worse for men because their identity is much more wrapped up in their role as a worker.
Men's declining workforce participation can potentially leave a lasting impact on the American economy.
It means slower growth of the economy, obviously. It means bigger wealth gaps within our society.
It certainly will have an impact on our productivity and probably already is.
The U.S. has been experiencing a severe shortage in labor, still missing 1.7 million Americans from the workforce compared to February 2020. The McKinsey Global Institute estimates that U.S. GDP could have been $296 to $442 billion higher in 2023 if the country had been able to fill its job vacancies. However, some experts suggest the impacts of men leaving or never entering the workforce could be more sector-specific.
You need young men coming in wanting to replace those people going out. And so if men have primarily been in more manual labor, more blue-skilled and skilled trades, if they're older and they're leaving in their retirement and there's not as many young men coming in, both because of declining cohort sizes, but moving in a different direction type of careers, we're going to be losing that sector of productivity.
Despite a steep rise in federal funding, the infrastructure sector hasn't been able to find enough workers, with the construction workforce shortage surpassing 500,000 in 2024.
We are a little concerned about the impact that inflation is going to have and has had on the movement of infrastructure dollars into the actual productive activity. Having a shortage of men in construction is going to raise a problem.
The trend could have a dire socio-political impact as well.
It'll get worse in ways that we would not like. I mean, I think it would lead to more premature deaths, but it will also likely lead to radicalization and polarization, because this is a frustrated, left-behind group with no options.
There are problems that government can address and problems that government can't address.
So one of the first functions that beats out policy is economic growth. You have a strong economy, you're going to have increased wage structure, and it's going to bring people back into the market.
More than a quarter of prime-age men not looking for work cited insufficient pay as a reason preventing them from work. And nearly half said competitive pay, salary, compensation, and/or bonuses was a very important factor when considering whether to enter or return to the workforce.
For the young, better training, skills training, some form of post-high school education, encouraging that, maybe even subsidizing that. I think part of the youth mental health crisis has to do with what's next. What's AI going to do? What am I going to do? Are there any stable jobs? I can't afford college. All those questions all come together. And so models that help them kind of give them a jump start can be really effective ways of intervening. And there are actually now really promising programs in high schools which teach kids financial literacy. They teach them about equitable entrepreneurship. They teach them about how do you foster better mental health as part of the workplace. And it seems to inspire kids to go on to college, right? Because they sort of see a pathway where they didn't see it before.
29% of men out of the labor force said that training and educational programs was another important factor in considering a return to the workforce.
Having the type of commitment from the employer to train and retain and offer upward mobility for workers, I think, will be very important. Trying to figure out more about career pathways in the labor market and not just the education side. So how is it that someone moves from first job, next job to best job? How do we help people understand and navigate?
Guys, the world is so toxic for men right now. Men have no dog in the fight. And that's one of the reasons why you have to basically focus on yourself and prioritize yourself. One of the best things you can do for yourself is to learn how to live, and survive and thrive without really having to spend much money at all. And that's why I created this course for you. Because in today's world, the challenges that are there are just unbelievable. Knowing how to thrive without spending a dime can make all the difference. That's why I created the Buy Nothing and Thrive course. This 12-lesson crash course teaches you how to secure cash, money, food, housing, healthcare, and more, all without spending a dime for any of it. Imagine having a trusted advisor showing you how to leverage available resources to stabilize your finances and grow your wealth. So join me and learn step-by-step strategies to maximize what's available to you and enhance your financial stability. Click the link in the description to sign up now. I also want to remind you guys to go and check out our Substack. We have a great Substack for you guys. Go and check out the Angry Guy Clubhouse on Substack. Dive into exclusive podcasts, manosphere topics, and more. Plus, get access to our passive income blueprint, exclusive videos, and guides on building wealth and thriving. We also have a chat where you can reach me directly. Don't miss out. Click the link in the description to subscribe now and get your free passive income blueprint when you do. It's so funny how society is now in a frenzy to get men back into the workforce after pushing men out of society, after pushing men out of the workforce. They're saying, oh, If we can offer more opportunities to men, they'll come back. If we can offer more money to men, they'll come back. We just need to figure out how we can incentivize men to work again. It's just that there's not enough good jobs. There's plenty of jobs right now, but we can't find men who want to do these jobs. We have to get them back into the workforce. Okay, so you know what? We'll put you on a plan where you can play a certain number of hours of PlayStation in exchange for working. Like, guys, this is the type of shit that they did during the fall of the Roman Empire, where single men were barred, literally barred from from entertainment. Like they went straight full authoritarian. They were barred from going to the Coliseum. They were barred from going to public events. So no video games, no TV, nothing. And they were forced to run in the streets during the winter time as a form of punishment, and they still would not get married. And within 100 years, the Roman Empire collapsed because barbarians took over. They realized the empire couldn't take care of itself because all the men had walked away. We were plunged into 1,000 years of darkness. Yes, there was another portion of the empire that did survive, but they basically kind of like shut shit down, and the rest of Europe was in complete disarray. And they basically spent 1,000 years in darkness. And it was some really fucked up times. We're talking about like those are the origins of like some really evil shit. That's like where witchcraft came from. That's where witchcraft came from. It was during that period of time when they really like started to like get to business on learning how to do witchcraft. I'm telling y'all.
Nearly a quarter of working Americans said they weren't satisfied with their growth opportunities in the workplace, compared to other OECD countries that on average spend 0.1% of their GDP on training their workers. The US spent only 0.03% of their GDP on job training in 2022.
Older age groups, it's tougher. You're probably not going to get these guys to retrain, but there are a lot of programs that have largely been pioneered in the UK, much more than here, but we're starting to pick up on them, that literally just try and reboot community activities. They get these isolated people in despair out of their houses. It can make a difference.
Social programs like disability benefits spark contentious debate.
It's very controversial. People have very strong opinions about this. While we don't know why it is happening, we can be pretty clear that the social welfare programs are helping, and the disability programs are helping to finance this situation in a way that was never originally intended.
A 2018 analysis by the Joint Economic Committee found that 64% of prime-age men who aren't working were receiving some sort of government assistance.
You see, guys, they're upset that a lot of guys are doing what I've been trying to teach you guys how to do. All right, how to buy nothing and thrive. Learn how to live off community resources. Learn how to live off public resources. Learn how to afford. Guys, you need these skill sets, especially when hell on earth arrives and a lot of you lose your jobs. You'll be looking at this book and going, okay, Angry's got my back, all right? All right, you're going to learn how to buy nothing and thrive. Guys, a lot of men are figuring it out. They don't need to work, okay? Once you learn how to leverage the system, you can basically live very comfortably, and you don't have to worry really about shit. You really don't have to worry about shit. That's just the reality around us. And I'm proud to say it. I am motherfucking proud to say it. Guys, listen to me. I make over 100K, and I am still taking care of business. I'm still, buying, if I buy fast food, it's just because I feel like it. All right. Beyond that, you guys, you don't even know how I get down.
So the one benefit that they rely heavily on is disability insurance. One, because they often are unable to work if they have a physical injury or high levels of addiction or whatever. But it also provides health insurance, which is huge.
Very much against the initial intentions of the founders of the program. They've ended up with a perverse situation that too often subsidizes or even incentivizes helplessness and long-term dependence.
Now, did you notice the very interesting things that she said? She said very often these men do have a disability that will qualify them for these services, right? Because men work so hard over the course of their lives, then most men end up with some problem. They end up with a back problem. They end up with a physical ailment. They end up with something because men go so hard in life, okay? Men do not take care of themselves. They're busting their balls for so much of their lives that they end up with a bad back. They end up with all of these problems, and as a result, they qualify. And look, and she said that it's, these men are not technically not breaking the law, but here's the thing: the simp immediately goes, the system was never supposed to work this way. It incentivizes people to just give up, incentivizes men to just give up. But these men qualify for these programs anyway, so why would they not take advantage of them, guys? All right, just like I keep telling y'all to take advantage of of the things you need to take advantage of. All right, get what you're supposed to get. Get what's coming to you, guys. All right. When women do it, they don't care because women are agents of the state and women are there to extract wealth and resources from men. But when men do it, they get pissed off because men simply exist to be the piggy bank for society. And men are basically stepping away from that role and saying, we're not doing that shit anymore and we're going to get our cut now, one way or another. And society is pissed off because the more men walk away and the more men take from the state, the more the state is hit very, very hard, right in the pocket.
If we thought about a system in which we had a work-first principle where the incentives were for getting the training and then showing up at the job and then staying at the job, I think we'd be in a lot better place than we are today.
However, some experts remain doubtful about whether altering the benefits program will lead to meaningful results.
I think until we deal with the deeper problem of ill health, ill mental health, these guys aren't going to respond to incentives.
Everybody is responsible for their brothers. Everybody's responsible for their neighbors and their friends. And we ourselves as citizens can help to shine a spotlight on this. It shouldn't be America's invisible problem. And the more that we talk about it, the more that we pay attention to it, the closer we get to.
They're literally out here acting like these men are sad and demoralized, like, oh my gosh, I don't have a job. I can't go and suffer working for someone else. Woe is me. Like, they're acting like these men are not out here living their best lives and enjoying themselves, just like really enjoying themselves, taking a breath of fresh air and saying, wow, this is fucking wonderful. I have all this free time. I have all of this disposable income. I can basically just stay home, play video games, watch TV if I want to. If I want intimacy, I'll use my hand. All right, I can go and hire a professional, but a lot of guys have come to the conclusion they'd rather keep their money to themselves, so they'll just use their hand and they're good to go. All right, use their hand, flick their wrist, and get right back to their day. They're like, look at this. I used my hand, and now I still have all of my money in my. Most men are at the point where they're just like, fuck it. We're just going to stay home. We're going to live our best life. Guys, you have men who are like, we could just, I'm staying home, and I can get so much done while staying at home. It's like basically they're building home gyms. PlayStation 5 is a one-time purchase. Gaming PC is a one-time purchase. I have guys who are telling me about like the PC that they purchased 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, and it's still a beast, and they will hold on to that PC until they leave this earth. I look around, guys, and like I said, pretty much everything I own has some value aside from the clothing that I have. I basically wear my clothes until they're run, and then I buy new ones. But the average woman, on the other hand, they're just buying all kinds of shit that they do not need. And it affects them in very negative ways. I don't know, man. I'm telling you, I'm just sad about life. Sad about the way that things are turning out. When you look at Gen Z and how miserable these people are and how lazy this generation is, it's kind of sad. It disappoints me, but you just have to take care of yourself and focus on yourself, because these bad little muffins, they're gonna be in the streets. They're gonna be in the streets stealing and squatting. Right now, they're sleeping and farting while they can stay with their parents. They're sleeping and farting. But as soon as that shit comes to an end, as soon as their parents cannot or will not subsidize them anymore, they're going to be out there in the streets stealing and squatting, all right? Pooping on the pavement. It's going to be like the 80s all over again, okay? It's going to be like a bunch of crackheads except no crack. All right, but they'll be using something else. Starts with an F and then ends with a null, if you get what I'm saying. These bad little muffins, bad little muffins, bad little muffins.
Define how bad the problem is right now.
Well, look at it this way. We can do a work rate, an employment rate for the prime age men. If you take a look at last month's numbers, they're lower than they were in 1940 at the tail end of the Great Depression. So we really do have a depression scale problem for work for men in the United States. If you look at the 21st century as a whole, the work rate for prime age men is actually substantially lower than it was in 1940. So we've basically got a 1937 scale work crisis for men in America, and we're missing it because we only look at the unemployment rate and at the number of people employed. We forget to look at the numbers for people who are neither working nor looking for work. For every guy who is out of work and looking for a job these days, there are over 4 who are neither working nor looking for work. So if you track the unemployment happy talk, you are missing 4/5 of the problem.
Were they working at one point?
Some of them were, but many of them are long-term dropouts from the workforce. What you see if you look over the history of the post-war era is a series of declining trajectories, almost like failing rockets. Each younger group works less at any given age in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s than the group before them. It's almost like rings on a tree. And so now you have a very large number of men who are basically long-timers out of the workforce altogether.
So why aren't they working?
Well, one reason that doesn't fly is that we can't say they're at home taking care of other people. There's an enormous care chasm between guys who are out of the workforce and women who are out of the workforce. It's like an order of magnitude different. If you ask these guys, and we do in these different labor surveys, why aren't you at work? Only a tiny fraction of them say that it's not because there are any jobs for them. And today that would be kind of implausible if you look at the peacetime, labor shortage that we've got going on. Some of them say that it's because of health problems. Some of them say that it's because of other problems, but it's not because of a lack of work, and it's not because of things that they're doing at home for other people.
When did the problems start in earnest, like these big numbers?
That's a really interesting question. For the first 2 decades of the post-war era, there was no sign of this problem at all. Then starting around 1965, a flight from work by men started to become evident in these numbers. And the really weird thing about this flight from work is that it's almost like a straight line from the 1960s to today. I mean, people are a little bit disorderly and irregular, but if you look at the numbers themselves, it's almost tracking a straight line from through the 60s and 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, the 2010s. It's been going on with almost, kind of geophysical regularity now for almost 60 years.
I don't get it. If it were pandemic related, I would get it. They got paid by the government to stay at home. They liked it. The pandemic induced a lot of stress, anxiety, depression in people that they're struggling to get over to this day. I don't get 50 years of men leaving the workforce more and more and more. What is that?
Well, Megan, it's clearly unnatural because for 10,000 generations, 50,000 generations in Homo sapiens, in our species, men are kind of like a natural provider force.
What he meant to say is a disposable utility. And now men are standing up and coming into themselves and saying that they're no longer going to allow themselves to be taken advantage of. They're no longer going to take care of society. They're no longer going to take care of a society that hates them, that means poor, that does not mean anything good towards them. They're going to walk away. They're just going to focus on themselves and live their own best lives. And now society is faced with this dilemma of what do we do without these men? And there's nothing they can really do. I mean, if you treat people like shit, if you demoralize people, if you steal from people, if you destroy the lives of people, and then try to gaslight them and tell them that, you're the problem and you should be grateful because you were born with a golden spoon in your mouth by your gender. I mean, guys, it was bound to happen. Was absolutely bound to happen. And it's funny because they really do not want to focus in and hone in on the fact that society is hostile towards men. And the reason why men are leaving society is because society sims have pushed men out and they're done. And men have a better chance going overseas or just staying home and enjoying themselves and only working when they have to, or if they even have to. Because, like they said, a lot of men are just basically getting disability and living their best lives that way.
And now you have an enormous contingent of men in modern America who are cast into this unnatural role as dependents upon society. You couldn't have something like this happening if we weren't as fantastically prosperous as we are today. You go through the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, up to the present, and you can come up with different kind of explanations that kind of work in part. One of the things that is said about rich countries in general is that they've been affected by what economists call structural and economic transformation, decline of manufacturing, outsourcing. China enters the WTO. I mean, there's some truth to that in depressing work rates and labor force participation for men all around the world, but it doesn't really explain what you see in our country. I mean, you wouldn't have a straight line out of the workforce if this was a consequence of the business cycle, right? You'd see something that was kind of wavy.
Yeah.
You'd see the China shock when China entered the WTO. You don't see that at all. So
is it related to women entering the workforce in greater numbers? I mean, are these like, is it a role reversal where these guys are staying home and the wives are bringing home the bacon?
Well, there are some people who argue that. I'm not so persuaded, and I'll tell you why. Because, I mean, women obviously have always worked. It's just since the end of World War II that they got paid for it in the labor force. But there's this huge influx of women into the labor force after World War II. And if they were displacing men, the participation rates would have flatlined. Instead, what we saw is that the participation rates went way up for like 50 years, from 1950 to the end of the century. And that means that women were kind of supplementing men. Since 2000, the participation rates for both men and women have been going down. So they've both been feeling the same pain. There's also something that I mention in this book, which we might want to keep our eye on. I'm not sure that it's a 4-alarm fire yet, but it's let's say a yellow flashing light. This is the women without work problem. For prime-age women who are out of the workforce and don't have kids at home and aren't currently married.
So they're like, it's a yellow light flashing right now, but it may become a serious problem because there's a lot of childless single women who are now also dropping out of the workforce. Guys, consider that modern women who are of the Gen Z and millennial generation, they have lower lifespans and a lower sense of well-being than women who were born in 1928, so almost 100 years ago. All right? And despite the fact that they are more educated and more empowered than ever. Think about that very, very carefully. Come 2030, 45% of all women between the ages of 25 and 44 will be childless and single. We're not counting all the other women. We're not counting women above that age. A lot of the women above that age, will also in their 60s, will be single. 50s and 60s will be single. All right? And if you factor in the single mothers, it gets even worse. All right, guys, you're looking at somewhere between 70 and 90% of single women in the U.S. who do not have a man, and things are getting worse in the economy. Money is becoming very, very scarce. Okay, as a result of rapid inflation, and inflation is only going to keep going up because they have to use inflation to reduce the value of the debt so that they can eventually pay their bills, and they're basically going to make Americans desperately poor to do this. And of course, the boomers, our favorite subject, they don't give a shit because they're the ones responsible for so much of the grief that we are going through. All right? They don't want us to talk about them, but we absolutely should be talking about them because they've played such a large role in creating this mess for us.
There are about 3 million of them. And some of the patterns that they're reporting about their own lives, what they do with their own time, their drug use, are looking a little bit too close for comfort to what I show in this book about the guys.
What's prime age? What is the prime age? What's the range?
Oh, prime age is 25 to 54. And it's
same as in the television key demo that we use to base our advertisement rates on, 25 to 54. That's the money spot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't come up with this. I wasn't smart enough to come up with this demographic, but it's kind of self-evident. Prime working age is 25 to 54, but it's not just all dollars and cents. I mean, this is also a key group for raising children, starting families. It's got an tremendously important social component to it too. And a lot of the dropouts, a lot of the male dropouts, they're disproportionately unmarried, don't have kids at home. I mean, you drop out of the workforce, you're also dropping out of family, you're dropping out of community. One of the things which I think is really kind of spooky that you see from looking at some of these numbers is how the workforce dropout guys say that they're spending their time. What do they do between waking up and going to sleep, right? This is their self.
I want to get to that 1 second, like how they're spending their time. But before we get to that, like if you said this began in like even the 90s, I would get it. Opioid crisis hits, people are they're pulled into this darkness, and then sometimes it's hard to find a job, right? Like if you're an active addict or even a non-using addict, you have a criminal record. All this makes re-entering the workforce much tougher, right? Much tougher. So that I would get. Starting back 30 years before that, my God, I'm so confused. If you said this started in 2007, the advent of the iPhone, I'd say I get it. People, it's addictive. You spend all day, you can't pull yourself away. You said COVID, right? Like this is a much bigger problem. It's been going on for decades, and against it is the genetic gravitational pull of hunter-gatherer, support family, be the man. Like it's the same reason why, women like me who work can't deny that for most of us, there is this biological pull to be with our children. And like that's why we wrestle so much when we're not all day.
Do not make any, don't get it twisted. Megyn Kelly is one of those boss babes. All right. She's one of those boss chicks just like that. All right. A lot of these conservative women, they were all a big part of the whole women's liberation move. They were a big part of. They loved feminism. They loved how it was used. But now that men are walking away, they're like basically, there's no one to subsidize their living. Because guys, the system only works if men continue to participate. When men walk away and they turn their backs on a society that has long turned its back on them, that's when everything starts to fall apart. That's when the seams begin to become undone. And that's when people wake up and realize that, hey, we're not going to make it without these men. We need to do something quickly and drastically. The thing is that they're fucked because men are not coming back. Who in their right mind would want to participate in this shit? Guys, what do you think regarding guys, the future of everything is basically women finding themselves in increased states of poverty and destitution and men walking away and living their best lives. What do you think about everything we discussed here today? What are your feelings on this, regarding how society treats men and the fact that men are not working right now? Do you agree that, going into the future, women are going to find themselves in heightened states of destitution as more men just focus on living their best lives? Let me know your thoughts and we'll talk about it in the comments. Like the video if you like it, don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA Men walking away. And cheers.